All right, we're going to get underway. We are going to cover quite a bit of ground in the next hour. Again, I'm going to give you a brief implementation update. We'll be joined by some of my talented colleagues. Sophie Leininger, our Government Relations Director, will talk about the 2024 legislative session, some of the things that are important for you to know about what came out of the bill that was just signed on May 29th, I believe it was, 28th. Marone Melican, our outreach director, will be giving you an update on our outreach efforts, including some upcoming opportunities as we prepare to open for social equity verification and the first round of pre-approved social equity licenses. And our general counsel, Eric Tauble, will be talking to you about where we stand with rules and giving you an update on what you can expect in the months to come. And so I've got quite a bit of information on one slide. I am not going to go into a lot of detail on all of the topics because my colleagues will be covering some of them in detail. But I want to, first of all, encourage everybody, if you haven't had the opportunity recently, to visit the OCM website. It has been newly redesigned and reconfigured with a lot of good information, including new information that was updated today, including a local government toolkit and workbook, a guide for social equity applicants that will walk you through what to expect and how to know if you may potentially be a social equity applicant. And we've got information about the verification process and pre-approval. We continue to prepare to launch Minnesota's cannabis market. We have some new timelines, which you are probably aware of, and which Sophie will cover in detail, and Marone will talk about as well. We will be opening for licensing on July 24th and opening for verification of social equity status on June 24th. So as we speak, within a matter of weeks, we will be underway. Actually next week, we'll be opening the window for verification. A lot of resources, including an upcoming workshop this week about that. So we are full steam ahead in launching the market. We continue, as we often say, you've heard me say this before, we are building the plane while we're flying it. And so we continue our work to actually stand up a brand new agency. We're hiring at a pace of about 3 to 4 people per week. Some weeks it's more than that, but it's generally speaking about 3 new hires we're adding every week, including Jess Jackson, who has joined us as our new social equity director. Chris Elvram, who some of you may know as the Deputy Director of the Office of Medical Cannabis, has joined us as our Chief Operating Officer. Josh Collins comes to us from previous roles in state government and in school district and other local government as our Comms Director, and Margaret Wyatrowski, who has taken the lead as our Enforcement and Compliance Director. You can, if you haven't had a chance, please sign up for the OCM newsletter, our Implementation Insider, and we'll keep you up to date as we continue to build out our staff. We're also preparing for the transition of our medical cannabis program and the hemp-derived enforcement team, who are currently housed at the Department of Health. They'll be moving over to OCM as of July 1st. As some of you are aware, this is an earlier transition than the law originally contemplated when it was passed last year. So originally they were going to be moving over to OCM on March 25th. That program transition has been accelerated to July 1st. We think it is great news because not only do we get to benefit from the expertise and institutional knowledge and wisdom of our colleagues at the Department of Health, Office of Medical Cannabis, but it also helps us nearly double our capacity in terms of working staff that we have. So we're looking forward to welcoming those folks on July 1st. We continue, and you will hear this from General Counsel Tauble, we continue to forge ahead on rulemaking, working closely both with the revisor's office and an internal team, both of permanent OCM staff and agency experts from our sister agencies across the enterprise, and hope to have a draft of rules for people to review later this summer. Eric will talk about that timeline and our approach to rulemaking and opportunities for engagement around that. OCM continues to support the governor's office on tribal compacting. Many of you may be aware, because we have talked about this before, Minnesota's law is the strongest in the nation in its recognition of tribal sovereignty and the role of tribes to operate and regulate cannabis on tribal lands. It also creates the mechanism for us to engage in compacts, and so that tribes who choose to participate in the larger commercial market may do so. And we have always envisioned and are very excited about the opportunity for Minnesota's tribes to play a foundational role in Minnesota's larger cannabis industry. Also, congratulations most recently to Leech Lake, which opened their dispensary, and we look forward to continuing to work closely with our tribal nations. We're continuing at OCM to build our enforcement presence. So that not only includes working closely with the Office of Medical Cannabis on the hemp enforcement, and that team was always due to transfer over here. And as I mentioned, they'll be coming on July 1st. But we've also entered into an agreement with the Department of Health to use those inspectors on behalf of OCM. As all of you are aware, until licenses are issued by the Office of Cannabis Management, sales of cannabis are not legal. So possession is legal, medical cannabis continues to be legal. All of the THC products that are on shelves, those legal products, are allowed for retail sale. But cannabis flower in particular and cannabis products are not legal for sale until such time as a business is licensed. Another reason to be very excited about getting started and moving forward on the licensing process. But in the meantime, our enforcement presence, which is really predicated on educating operators on expectations and making sure that products on shelves are actually legally being sold and that there is not illegal transactions happening, that continues to build. We're also developing, as I mentioned early, resources for local governments. And as I said, a workbook and a resource guide was posted to our website today. We know that local governments will play a critical and crucial role in the success of our industry launch. Folks who want to operate in a municipality will be working closely with local governments to gain their approval for zoning and all of the other time, place, and manner ordinances that a city may have put in place. And so we want to make sure that we're working closely with local governments. So you will see those resources posted as of today. Later this week, on Thursday, we'll be convening our second Cannabis Advisory Council meeting. That is on June 20th. We are very excited to continue working with that council. Sophie will cover in the legislative changes that there are some additional seats that were added to the council in the legislative session. And so we're looking forward to opening and posting those new appointments. In addition, we've moved to a new office, which is a singular milestone for us. And as I mentioned, we launched a new website chock full of information, including a handy search function. So if you can't find what you need, type it into the search and it will direct you to the information you are looking for. With that, and I know I have moved through it very quickly, but we have a lot of ground we want to cover. So I am going to turn it over next to, I believe, Sophie Leininger, our Government Relations Director.
Thank you, Charlene. Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie Leininger, and I am the Government Relations Director for the Office of Cannabis Management. And I will be covering the legislative session update. So as our slides catch up with us, I think just to reground us in this work, Chapter 342 is the governing statute for cannabis legalization in Minnesota. It was signed into law in 2023, as many of you all know, establishing the Office of Cannabis Management as a new state office and laying the framework for legalization and a regulatory structure for an adult use industry in Minnesota. In coordination with stakeholders, OCM worked with the legislature to introduce and pass several changes to Chapter 342 this past legislative session. Many of the changes were recommended to support the ongoing implementation and strengthen the office's work to build a timely and successful cannabis market with the ability to regulate effectively over time. Governor Walz signed the bill on May 24th, 2024. The final bill included many of OCM's recommendations to build upon the structure of Minnesota's cannabis law, including provisions to strengthen social equity, improve the application and licensing process, establish a pre-approval process for social equity, and enhance protections and build continuity for the state's medical cannabis program patients and caregivers. A more detailed summary of the legislation is available on our new website, as Director Briner previewed. The law includes several changes to strengthen the social equity provisions of Chapter 342. As passed last year, Chapter 342 included a merit-based system as well as a lottery mechanism. With the new changes, the license selection for capped licenses will replace a points-based system with a vetted lottery process. OCM will utilize the application requirements already included in last year's law and strengthened in this year's law to vet entrance into a lottery. In this industry, where there will be more qualified applicants than licenses available, a well-vetted lottery process is designed to give people who have historically been excluded a fairer and more equitable opportunity to enter the market. Additionally, once rulemaking is completed and general licensing launches, there are certain license types that are not capped, and therefore OCM will not need to utilize a lottery selection process. Applicants for uncapped license types will be reviewed against the same statutory requirements in the application to maintain the same qualified standard for licensure, even if a lottery selection is not utilized. Second, the new law creates a new classification for social equity licenses to maintain the value of the license type, even after the application phase. The new law also changes the ownership requirements for a social equity applicant from 100% to 65% to address barriers in access to capital while still protecting a high threshold of ownership. Previously, Chapter 342, last year's law, included a limitation and restriction on ability for social equity applicants to transfer or sell their license to non-social equity entities. As recommended by OCM, the new law allows for social equity licenses to be transferred or sold freely after 3 years. For those first 3 years, social equity licenses can still be transferred or sold to another verified social equity entity. Next slide, please. As recommended by OCM, the new law clarifies the order of operations for the application process to ease applicant comprehension, better inform local partners, and prevent bottlenecks and delays. The new law eliminates the requirement for a premise to be secured at the point of initial application. This change is designed to prevent financial risk and hardship to applicants when there's no guarantee or assurance of a license at the time of an application. This is an important lesson we have learned from other states, and by not requiring a property at the time of application, it is intended to better protect applicants. The application process will begin with OCM. Applicants will first complete an application as detailed in statute in 342.14, and OCM will complete the vetting and review of these requirements. After initial due diligence, OCM will advance vetted applicants through a lottery selection process if there are a limited number of licenses. From there, selected applicants will be run through a background check process. Once the second round has been completed, applicants are to secure property and work with local partners through the approval processes. Local governments will be asked to verify zoning compliance, and this is only after OCM has completed the initial application review. Once local governments have approved zoning compliance, OCM will conduct site inspections and issue licenses accordingly if all things are in order. Next slide, please. As previewed by Director Briner and as recommended by OCM, the new law also accelerates the transition of the medical program and the hemp-derived enforcement authority from the Department of Health to OCM on July 1st, 2024. The medical registry team and the Office of Medical Cannabis staff will continue to seamlessly operate. The Office of Medical Cannabis has prepared summaries of various changes to the medical program as a result of this new law, and this information is available on their webpage. In addition to the medical program, the hemp-derived enforcement team will also transition on July 1st, and OCM will assume regulatory authority over the current enforcement work as detailed in Chapter 151.72. The transition of the hemp-derived regulations to Chapter 342 is still anticipated to occur in 2025 once the rulemaking process is completed and these businesses are transitioned to the licensing structure. Until then, businesses will continue to be registered with the office. OCM has developed a local toolkit to support local partners during this continued interim of hemp-derived regulations before the launch of the licensing structure. As a reminder, this toolkit is available on the OCM website. Next slide, please. The law also includes several changes to enhance protections for patients, caregivers, and persons in the medical cannabis registry program. These changes were recommended in response to significant feedback from patients and caregivers about how the program may work for them. This includes modifications to the supply limits to better allow patients who may have different medical needs access to the products they need, changes to civil protections to also include caregivers and parents who are registered to support patients, and the removal of the requirement for caregivers to undergo a background check every 2 years at their own expense. Next slide, please. Also, as previewed by Director Briner, the new law creates a pre-approval process for social equity applicants for certain license types in a limited number. We are preparing in real time for that process to begin this summer. The process provides social equity applicants with an early mover advantage to establish business operations and prepare for the adoption of rules. License pre-approval does not grant full license authority for applicants, but it does allow for the assurance of a license for selected social equity applicants that will be critical in preparing the business, securing capital, and gaining local approvals. The new law includes specific dates for the pre-approval application process to begin. As required in statute, OCM will open the application window on July 24th, 2024, and close the window on August 12th, 2024. Also, as required in state law, this application process for pre-approval is only open for applicants who have been verified as social equity applicants. To meet this requirement, OCM will launch a social equity verification process prior to the pre-approval application. This begins on June 24th. You will hear more about the social equity verification process from our outreach director, Marone, next. The pre-approval process is open for certain license types, not all of the 13 as open in statute. All of these license types during the pre-approval process will be limited, or capped, as we call them. Later, once the rulemaking process is complete, OCM will launch applications and licensing for general licensing. At that time, with specific timing still yet to be determined, all 13 license types, including those that were already included in pre-approval process, will be available for all applicants, including both social equity applicants and non-social equity applicants. This means that the pre-approval process is not the only window for social equity applicants to be verified for future licensing, but it is the only window for verification for the pre-approval process. Next slide, please. There are additional changes included in the new law. As we have shared in public updates over the last few months, OCM recommended a change to streamline the supply chain, meaning to merge the adult use and medical cannabis supply chains at point of cultivation. However, the legislature did not adopt this recommendation. The law continues to require two separate supply chains, one for medical cannabis and one for adult use cannabis. The legislature did adopt a recommendation to consolidate license types and replace 3 specific medical license types with a medical endorsement structure. This means that businesses with license types that allow for cultivation, manufacturing, and retail can also apply to engage in these activities to serve the medical market. The new law allows for research as part of a micro-business license and in connection to an academic institution. That is a new change that we wanted to highlight today too. And finally, the legislature adopted the governor's budget recommendations to establish a state reference laboratory. This was an important priority for the office, and the implementation team focused on establishing the state reference lab will continue to implement this work and create the standards for testing facilities in the state. Next slide, please. I covered most of the legislative changes, but we also wanted to provide an update related to our local governments and the role that they play in this licensing process. We are thankful for our continued conversations with our local partners. They will serve an important role in this launch. And so we are continuing to work on guidance, and as previewed by Director Briner, we have newly published a guidebook on our website, and that is available for our local partners to take a look. As it relates to local government, Chapter 342 includes specific roles for local governments in 342.13, 342.14, and 342.22. They are able to establish local ordinances to guide zoning, time, place, and manner for cannabis businesses, and will serve as a near final check on proposed cannabis businesses, which are required to abide by zoning restrictions across all license types. Additionally, for cannabis businesses seeking to engage in retail sales, local governments will establish a local retail registration process and then will conduct yearly age verification and compliance checks. Both local governments and potential applicants are encouraged to engage in preliminary conversations early to learn more about how different localities are planning for their roles and to learn how interactions and planning will work together. A lot of this information is included in the new guidebook available on the website. We are also working to plan a specific webinar session designed specifically for our local partners. More on that soon. That concludes the legislative update and the update on local governments. And so I will now introduce Marone Melican, OCM Outreach Director.
Thank you, Sophie. Hi, everyone. My name is Marone Melican, and I am the Outreach Director here at the Office of Cannabis Management. And so I'm excited to provide you all with a general update about just the work that we've been doing and all that's to come in the coming weeks, months, and looking into the new year. Next slide, please. So OCM continues to remain committed to engaging advocates and the community to help inform our implementation and regulatory activities and priorities. As of late, our team has been expeditiously working to develop social equity and pre-approval licensing resources, technical assistance and guidance, and setting up the overall program to best support individuals that would like to participate in this initial phase of the launch, which is the social equity verification process and the pre-approval license process. With that being said, while nearly almost all of our team's capacity is working to meet the quick deadlines for a successful launch, there are still a number of ways to engage with our office. If you haven't already, please sign up for the OCM Insider newsletter. It's a great resource to get the most up-to-date information about cannabis licensing and really all the things about the Office of Cannabis Management. Be sure to provide input and expertise on rulemaking, which my colleague Eric Tauble will speak about next in his presentation. And as always, we remain committed to our tribal engagement efforts led by our tribal liaison, Jackie Croshoe. As we continue to meet our tight deadlines, we will do all that we can to continue to build on our engagement efforts and ensure that we are meeting the needs of folks. But just recognizing that in this initial phase, a lot of resources and a lot of our commitment has been in being able to kind of stand up and make sure folks have what they need. Next slide, please. Awesome. So the Office of Cannabis Management is responsible for implementing and enforcing the rules and the regulations governing Minnesota's cannabis market. One of our key responsibilities includes overseeing the cannabis business license application process and awarding licenses. As part of this process, we manage a third-party vendor to verify the social equity status of applicants. This process will start with the verification of applicants who meet qualifications for social equity applicant status. Following that, those verified through this process will submit an application for a business license. They will go through a review and a vetting process with our office, and if qualified, will be entered into a lottery. Applicants selected through the lottery will then go through the necessary next steps in order to be able to move their license from license pre-approval to being able to actually launch after the adoption of rules. Next slide, please. So as mentioned in the previous slide, and as my colleague Sophie mentioned earlier, the first step in license pre-approval is social equity verification. Verification is the process where OCM confirms an applicant's social equity eligibility. This service is free. Applicants must submit an application and documents through an online system that will be linked on OCM's website to verify their eligibility. The social equity verification system, as noted here, will open on June 24th, 2024, and the system will close on July 10th, 2024. This is just a note to anybody. If you have any interest in a social equity license during this initial round, the license, that being the license pre-approval round, OCM recommends going through the verification process. SCA verification is required to be considered in the license pre-approval. We also encourage you to start the verification process early to make sure that you meet the deadline and that you are able to provide all of the necessary documentation and work with the vendor to make sure that all of the required documentation is there so that they are able to verify you. One thing to note is that future verification opportunities will be available as subsequent rounds of licensing will take place. And so this won't be folks' only chance, but if folks want to be part of the pre-approval process, I do recommend that they do this process and that they do it early so that they can get in the system and so that our vendor is able to work with them. And they've assured us that they're really committed to working with folks through that process. More information, including updated guidance, can already be found on our website, including a social equity verification guidebook, which will be noted at the end. Next slide, please. As also mentioned by my colleagues, the law created an initial application pre-approval round available for social equity applicants only. The license pre-approval process is designed for social equity applicants interested in early access to the cannabis market. This is the next step after social equity verification. This process includes submitting an application on OCM's online application system, along with all the required documentation. However, you will first get social equity verification, and then if you receive social equity verification, then you would be able to proceed into the social equity license pre-approval application portal. Guidance and materials on this process, as well as a workshop, will be announced at a later date. Next slide, please. In Minnesota law, a social equity applicant is defined as an applicant for a cannabis license that has at least 65% ownership and control held by one or more individuals who meet at least one of the criteria listed in front of you. This is an important detail as folks are contemplating whether they believe they qualify as a SCA applicant and whether they choose to get verified. It's important to note that social equity licenses must be owned by at least 65% by social equity applicants, which can include one person or multiple individuals. Every person who makes up that 65% ownership must be verified in order to proceed to applying for license pre-approval. We have updated guidance on our website that also shares acceptable documentation associated with each of the social equity criteria. Applicants are encouraged to submit as much supporting material as they would like to support their social equity verification. And so we'll mention at the end of the presentation the location on our website, but right on there, it outlines the different pieces that of material that a person could submit to verify their social equity status. Next slide, please. Minnesota's cannabis law requires that people interested in applying in the first round, meaning the license pre-approval, for the following license have to have the social equity classification. And so this is just to note that, as Sophie had mentioned earlier, that not all licenses are part of the pre-approval round. And so this is just noting the licenses that are available during this round. Next slide, please. And lastly, OCM is excited to host a workshop to provide social equity applicants training on how to complete the social equity verification process this Friday. We have officially hit our capacity for the event. However, we are planning to share guidance, training videos, and additional resources on the OCM website for everyone to access. Our current resources, including the social equity verification guidance, can be found on our website at mn.gov/OCM under business, and then under that it says social equity applicants. And so you'll be able to see a variety of resources that are available right now, and we'll continue to increase the resources on that website so that folks are really able to be able to navigate through this system appropriately. And I will ping it over to my colleague, Eric Tobble.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Tobble. I'm the General Counsel for the Minnesota Office of Cannabis Management, and I'm going to provide a rulemaking update. I'm going to focus on two things. One is the current timeline for the rulemaking endeavor, and the second is much more of a discussion about the approach the office is taking to rulemaking to provide some insight and guidance into how we plan to organize the system. If we could go to the next slide, that'd be great. All right, so the rulemaking timeline. As OCM has sort of mentioned for, I think, months on end, the goal we have is to have the regulatory order adopted in Q1 of 2025. The office is on track to meet that goal. We have continued to work with subject matters from across the state enterprise. That includes people from the Departments of Agriculture, Health, Pollution Control, and Commerce. We've also increased our capacity within the office to ensure that we have the necessary resources and people power to get the rules drafted and in a place where we can start to engage the public on what we're thinking about to get feedback and to guide our approach. We constantly go back to the 7 or 8 surveys the office did at the tail end of 2023 and the start of 2024 to get information and feedback from Minnesotans about what they believe is necessary to make the market work. We also do maintain a inbox where comments can be sent. We review that inbox to see if there's valuable information that might guide particular portions of the rules. So if you have feedback or concerns specifically about rulemaking, that's the inbox to use. If you have broader questions about the law or implementation, you can use our general inbox. As noted, we're on track to meet the stated goal of adopting rules in Q1 of 2025. But before we get to that space, we also are working as hard as we can to ensure that later this summer, we have a draft of rules available for the market and future market participants to review and provide feedback and commentary on before we take the step of announcing an official comment period with the Office of Administrative Hearings further down the line. Next slide, please. So in past implementation updates, we've given some overview of the types of areas where regulations will likely be occurring. This implementation update, we're going to focus on the sort of rulemaking approach that is guiding how we're drafting those rules and thinking about implementing the regulatory environment under which the adult use and medical programs will operate, as well as the lower potency hemp edible retailer and manufacturing licensees. So as I think Sophie mentioned earlier, we have about 13 total licenses. 11 fall within cannabis, 2 in that lower potency hemp-derived edibles category. Because there are a number of licenses that allow for multiple types of activities and multiple authorized and endorsed activities, we're approaching rulemaking rather than license-tied rulemaking and instead focusing on endorsed or authorized activity rulemaking. So, for instance, we won't see a section of rules that's about how a micro business conducts its operations, but instead we'll see rules that specifically deal with cultivation or deal with manufacture or deal with processing, extraction, and the like. One of the goals of the authors of what eventually became Chapter 342 was to create a Minnesota market that was sort of scalable so that persons could enter the market at a micro business and do 1 or 2 activities and then build up perhaps into a meso business license, a cultivator license, a manufacturer license, something further up the supply chain. The goal for our rulemaking is to create a set of rules that applies equally to a person who has a micro license and is manufacturing as it does to someone who has a full manufacturing license. In order to achieve that sort of scalable rule development, we're focusing on rules that are easy to understand and easy to implement, and that are unaffected, again, by the size or scale of the operator who are undertaking those activities. Finally, one of the things we're doing in order to, again, create an ease for market participants is to, instead of, again, creating siloed rule structures for the various license types, pull out sort of cross-cutting categories that every single operator within the market will need to abide by. These sort of larger categories include things like security, ensuring that people and products are safe when cultivating, manufacturing, selling, or distributing cannabis products. We want to have a uniform track and trace approach so that no matter where you are in the supply chain, you can understand what it is you're supposed to be including in the state will end up using metrics of what will need to be recorded, what doesn't need to be recorded, and how that information is conveyed to the state. We're also going to have things like a general operations section for those sort of categories of information or regulations that, again, hit every single point of the supply chain. As noted on the previous slide, the goal is to have a working draft of the rules out later this summer. We will certainly have that plastered on the brand new OCM website, but we'll also be in various outreach opportunities, meeting with people who are interested in joining the cannabis market, and look forward to sort of receiving feedback from folks as they get a chance to review those. Like I say, if you have any questions or feedback for the rulemaking process, we do have that rulemaking inbox that was on the previous slide. You're welcome to send information to us that way or to reach out through any of our other channels, and we will be sure to include that in our materials. I think we're good to go to the next last slide. So this was the implementation update. I'll let Shar wrap it up, but I do want to note that as the cannabis office has grown, we started to include a lot more people. And so we're now at a point as an agency where the number of people who didn't appear on camera is greater than those who did, and the amount of work the people who didn't appear on camera did is much greater than those of us who were on camera. So we certainly appreciate our fellow OCMers who helped us with this presentation today.
Thanks for that, Eric. And thanks, Marone, Sophie, and Eric for going through a lot of information in a relatively short amount of time. I'm a big believer in transparency, and so I think it is fair to note that we had a couple of technical glitches at the beginning, but hopefully it did not interfere with the quality of the information that you got or the information about resources and where you can go to learn more. We are excited at the Office of Cannabis Management about the opportunity that we have to do things differently than other states. I often say to the team as we are having conversations and making decisions in real time that it is very seldom that a state agency has the opportunity to both center equity and to learn lessons from those who have gone before in order to try to do things and meet outcomes and achieve things that haven't been possible before. And that's really what we are doing in real time. Minnesota does not have the burden of being the first to legalize cannabis, but we do have the opportunity to do it differently. And that's what we're trying to do while also making sure that we are adhering closely to the spirit of the law, that we are meeting the very robust timelines that came to us with the passage of the bill in May. And we are focused full steam ahead on partnering with business operators, applicants, advocates, local governments, and all of our sister agencies throughout the enterprise to really make sure that we are standing up an industry that flourishes, that is rooted in equity, and that will offer safe, reliable products to adults who choose to consume, and offer medical cannabis without disruption to patients who depend on those products for their health and well-being. And so we appreciate you joining us today. We encourage you to continue to check in on all of the new resources and all of the soon to be coming and soon to be added resources that will be on our website. Take advantage of the opportunities that you have to engage with us. And we will continue to see you out in community as we work together to stand up a cannabis industry to be proud of here in Minnesota. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.